Welcome to the Wellness Pulse with Monica Stevens. From CPR to self care, staying in rhythm with your well being. Thanks for tuning in. Health is wealth. What stress and trauma do to the heart? What does your heart remember that your mind forgets? In this episode, Amelia and I are going to explore the ways life experiences shape our health physically and emotionally. From movement to memory, we're unpacking what it means to reconnect with yourself, stay grounded, and take care of the one thing that keeps it all going, your heart. This episode was recorded in February during Heart Health Month, but these conversations are timeless. Take what you need and share it with someone who might need it too. Today, we will be discussing the heart and mind connection. And we have guest A. Starr, a nurse and domestic violence advocate, with us to explore this topic. How are you doing today, A. Starr?
Absolutely amazing, shining bright. So happy to be here with you, Monica. It is such a pleasure. My goodness, I love speaking about our heart because the heart is the lifeline to an abundance, not just living, but thriving. And so, as we dive into this today, I am excited to talk about how trauma affects our heart as well as what we eat, what we drink, etc. So, coming from both aspects, nursing and personal experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know this is going to be a very riveting podcast as we delve into our lifeline, the heart. And, when we talk about February, we of course have Valentine's Day, and, you've got couples, celebrating, but it's also like Heart Healthy Month. And so we want to focus on the heart in multiple ways because, as you know, the emotional ties that we have to people and to events and the stress and so forth, all of that, the heart mind connection really affects our overall well-being. And as you kind of alluded to earlier, I mean, just a few minutes ago, health is wealth. And when we want to talk about living abundantly, we want to make sure that we're talking about making sure that we're living in a heart healthy kind of fashion. So today we're going to make sure that we kind of talk and discuss and explore how stress and trauma impact heart health.
Absolutely. You mentioned about February being Valentine's Day. I hadn't even thought of that. But we talk so much about love. We talk so much about love for others. But really, who can pour from an empty cup? I mean, what heart beats without the blood of life flowing through it? So we need something that's going to be able to pump and pump strong, right? So let's practice with
Mhm.
loving ourselves first, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our heart, taking care of our mental and physical health so that we can be that love or lover for this February 14th.
Yes, and I mean, and for all year, all month, all year,
Yes.
because it takes our heart and our mind to do everything. And you were so right. How can you pour from an empty cup? With so many things and so many responsibilities and just so much stimulation in our day-to-day lives, trying to maintain like a balance between like a good and healthy you, that you should move, that you should do exercise. Of course, we all know that a sedentary lifestyle is absolutely like the opposite of heart healthy.
Hmm.
We want you moving. We want you moving with purpose. So you should be moving. And then also, having exercise at least like maybe 3 times, 30 minutes a week. I mean, 3 times a week, 30-minute increments is what I'm trying to say. If you have mobility issues, there's ways that you can get your um, exercise from a seated position. Like if you're older, have knee problems, or if you just have mobility issues, you don't necessarily have to be older. So I think one thing is finding something that is realistic for you. For me personally, I don't like to feel like I'm exercising when I'm exercising. Like getting on the treadmill and running is like torturous. I need to like dance, or I have a gazelle, which is low impact on my knees. So if I put on some good music and, you know, try to aim at getting my heart rate up, I kind of lose myself in the moment. So those are things that, I think, the action that, that you can incorporate. If you like water, like water aerobics or something. Pilates or yoga are things that are a little bit more gentle that you can do at home or in a group. Maybe you like to dance, so there's if you're not good at doing it at home or self-motivated, there's also like Zumba at the local YMCA and other resource centers. There's also a lot of things here in Jacksonville where people are kind of doing different types of dancing, like with maybe a Christian group, or, there may be other religious groups, but I know that there's some like praise and worship and, some of the weight loss, I guess maybe health coaches and athletic trainers are probably offering. So those are some ways that you can just really, I guess delve in and get your exercise. But the other thing that you need to really explore, in my opinion, is the emotional well-being of a person. And I know people don't always want to mix like, your clinical with your emotional. And I mean, as a nurse, sometimes the mental health aspect of things was viewed as less clinical, or maybe not as important, because you can live with a broken heart, but you can't like live with an actual like broken heart. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
I understand that for years, mental health was taboo. You don't want to be put in a box and labeled as crazy, that you're not with it. But that in itself is crazy. And so when you're talking about, your heart and your emotions, it all goes together. Stress literally kills. So I was just doing some random research and found out that even childhood stress, when you're exposed to stress, even in a child, and I'm coming from a domestic violence point of view, that type of stress and trauma, worrying, fear, it causes the child to be 50% more likely to develop some sort of cardiovascular disease. Think about that. There's this 2 year
right.
old, this 3 year old, 50% chance more likely. From what? Nothing but stress. From hearing, you know, what's going on in the home, what's going on in the community, what is stressing them out. And honestly, sometimes it's not in the home, sometimes it's bullying. So we have to be mindful of all the stressors in life and find ways to release. I love that you said you don't like to exercise and know that you're doing it. You know, Many times we do look at the programs. You mentioned several different programs and different types of exercise because there's something truly for everybody. But I'm a dreamer. I'm very creative. I daydream, I plan, and the best time to do that is when you're moving, walking, running. Number one, you don't have to worry about a sport where you're dependent on somebody else. You can go as fast or as slow as you like. You can go for as long as you like or as little as you like, depending on how you feel. And it's okay today to do 15 minutes and maybe tomorrow do 2 hours, whatever fits into your schedule. And for me, that's the way that I can clear my mind, control my emotional and physical health. Two for one. So I know that's not the only way. You mentioned swimming. Again, it's a sport you can do by yourself. You know, Laps around the pool. You don't need somebody with you to do that. You don't have to wait for Mary Sue and Jack to get on board. You can take care of yourself by yourself, clearing your mind and also increasing that heart rate, protecting your heart, and just being all around healthy.
Definitely. Those are some really awesome contributions. And, just talking about moving and, thought processing and kind of, brainstorming. It can kind of go either way because, like, I think sometimes being able to move and just be kind of mindful of yourself and one with your own thoughts is great because, for me, I'm a praying woman. So
Mhm.
I need to be my spirit still sometimes. And sometimes, we do have angst or anxiety. And those are the things that I think that, contribute to poor heart health that you don't necessarily think about. When you think about heart health, you think about, of course, managing your diet, and you think about, exercising more and not living a sedentary lifestyle. But you don't always think about, well, I hold things in that I should be expressing, or I let people make me feel as if I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And so we don't think about the emotional aspect always of what sometimes not managing our emotions properly can cause. And that can be like twofold because if, like, people who've experienced trauma in youth or like in domestic violence, you've got possibly, most likely, different areas of problems that are kind of overlapping. Because a lot of times with domestic violence, you may have cyclic things, or you know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say a word that I obviously can't pronounce right now, but I want to talk about the cycle of things and how, if you're experience a lot of times with domestic violence, you have financial instability. With financial instability, of course, comes a lot of other instability. You can't necessarily be focused on buying the most healthy food if you're worried about, how you're going to buy food at all,
Mhm.
or if you're worried about, where you're going to stay or what you're going to eat or how you're going to get to work. Those things also play into maybe how you deal with your loved ones and how much sleep you're getting. And those things all play into, heart health. Are you overstimulated? Are you a person who just pours and pours and pours, and never takes time for themselves, never takes time to rest or to assess their needs mentally, physically, emotionally? Um, are you those type of people? So when you have those type of things at play, you're going to have increased, heart issues. Case in point, when you have more stress and chronic stress, you're going to have increased cortisol levels, which, in addition to increased inflammation, and these are going to contribute to hypertension because then your heart's going to be working harder. And these chronic stress leads to prolonged activation of the stress response. So these, of course, are contribute these like elevated cortisol levels and the increased blood pressure are going to contribute to plaque buildup in the arteries, which are going to put you at a higher risk for heart attack and stroke.
Yes. So when we think of cortisol, let's break that down to what cortisol is. I know that being nurses, we know what it is, but let's imagine like you're about to get in a car accident, you slam on the brakes and you miss it, right? The car doesn't hit you,
Right.
you survive. But that fight or flight, that pounding of the chest, that last minute that you only have, to make a split decision. Ugh,
Yeah.
a split decision. That's when your cortisol levels are supposed to go up high so you can make the right
Right.
decision. But imagine staying in that state of mind for not just a minute, but for hours. And that is what chronic stress, PTSD, and so many other things do to you. We have the chronic worriers, those that have unresolved trauma, even negative emotions, even if it's negative self talk, you can work yourself up. For example, when I was a nurse working for a doctor in a doctor's office, I would take the vitals, right? So, and I'm sure everybody listening can relate to going to the doctor and getting your vitals taken. Well, people don't want to step on that scale. I mean, it is what it is. But usually you'd step on the scale first on your way to the room. And then when you get to the room, we sit you down and we take your blood pressure. Well, the person's usually a little uncomfortable because nobody is so most people aren't so satisfied with their weight. So they're really kind of thinking about, oh, I could lose a few pounds. So your mind is already a little elevated, your emotions are already a little high. And then we sit you down to take your blood pressure. Not to mention, some people have the white coat syndrome. Oh my God, the doctor's going to come in here, da 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 da. But usually our blood pressure is high. So when you have that type of stress just in everyday life that causes your blood pressure to be high, imagine what it is when you're looking over your shoulder. Imagine what it is when you're, like you said, all the instances when you're trying to figure out what you're going to eat, where you're going to eat, where you're going to lay your head. How are you going to get from day to day? All of those things are real stressors that many of us have. And if we haven't had, we have had in the past, or if we haven't had, we know someone who has. All of that to say, it's so important to realize that and do something to decompress. Exercise is one way. Another way, simply meditation, deep breathing, resetting, journaling. All of these are techniques that you can do to get your mind to stop racing, to calm down, so that you can control your heart health. Have you done any of those or recommend any of those?
Oh, definitely. I so agree. And um, journaling is one that I find because I like to think a lot. And sometimes those thoughts can manifest angst or worry. And like I said, I'm a Jesus lover, so I don't believe that fear is of the Lord, but I am a human. And so um, there are times that I want to worry or overly think about things, and that can cause angst. And if you have things that, are compromising your, just your basic, needs, shelter, safety, water, security, food, you know what I mean? Those basic things, of course, you're going to be in a higher level of angst. And, you talked about PTSD and being in your fight or flight um, type of mode. And if you're
Mhm.
always, in that mode, I wanted to talk about two things actually. Oh, and you mentioned white coat syndrome. It's so that's a pleasant memory because my grandmother taking her to the hospital whenever you go, her blood pressure would always be high, and I took her to the hospital a couple of times for a few elevated blood pressures, and they would give her stuff and it would come down a little bit, but it would still be extremely elevated, and then we get home and it would be like picture perfect. And so I definitely have experienced that white coat syndrome. I think I have it at the dentist office. Like even when I feel calm, my blood pressure is just higher at the dentist office. So sometimes knowing that and really giving ourselves, time to kind of, sit and, reflect on
Mhm.
that because, you may then want to consider, and this is kind of like a different topic, but not exactly because you don't want to be over medicated. Like if your blood pressure is always high and you're not monitoring it at home, but only when you go to places where your blood pressure is elevated, where you're worried about your weight, but you've been eating all the things that you weren't doing, where your blood pressure might be a little more elevated, it would be better to monitor it some at home. See if you could see if that was, really a true thing. Um, Also, when we talk about PTSD, research indicates that there's a strong link between PTSD and heart failure hospitalization. There was like a study involving US veterans revealed that those diagnosed with PTSD had a nearly 50% higher risk of developing heart failure over a 7-year period compared to those without PTSD. Can you believe that?
Absolutely. And I hear and I respect what you say about the veterans, but many times that's what we think of when we think of PTSD. But hear me when I say very clearly that PTSD can happen to any of civilians.
Oh, yeah.
PTSD comes from domestic violence. PTSD comes from that car accident. PTSD can come from any trauma that has been so severe that you're afraid that it's going to happen again.
Oh,
So
definitely.
many of us are in denial, are misdiagnosed. about PTSD. It is not just a veteran's disease.
Oh, definitely not. And in fact, I spent a little bit of time where I got to be an education enthusiast for a behavioral health hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the privilege of instructing the staff in courses revolving around like assessing suicide risk and de-escalating verbally different types of emotional kind of confrontation or emotional turmoil. And definitely, I so know that, for a long time there was a myth, or people just thought PTSD, you thought military. And I often would tell this very graphic um, kind of story because I've had the privilege of having some friends, who've served in the military and who've shared their experiences with me. And so this particular individual that I had the chance to interview, um, he was a soldier in the military, and at the time, he ended up having some events, I guess, with I don't know for how many people this is common knowledge or whatnot, and I'm not a military person, although my family has served. I personally do not know, but I guess they have kind of reconnaissance. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but recon where after there's some sort of tragedy, I guess other soldiers or military personnel have to go and collect the remains of the military people that were injured. So you therefore could be collecting the bodies and body pieces of your comrades, and that in and of itself is just traumatic to even speak on, let alone to experience. So this individual had situations like this in the military, but prior to even enlisting and becoming a soldier, this individual had situations where um, there was definitely um, instability in the home, where the children, I mean, he gave recollections of having to wash up in like a McDonald's bathroom, having to discard underwear because they were like stained, and, just kind of having to fend for himself. In addition to, the family, I think the dynamics were really interesting where sometimes the children may have been encouraged to have sex with one another. So that would be obviously some sort of incest, and obviously can scar you in a lot of ways that, I can't even fathom. So I say all these graphic things to say that um, this individual had multiple types of PTSD. And as we are growing and becoming more open and more aware in mental health and behavioral health and the connection between the heart and the mind and the physical implications of what going on, living in the fight or flight, type of mode, what that can do to our insides, I think is allowing people to really explore, better options. And you mentioned, breathing episode or breathing exercises to kind of get you through this. I think it's called, it's a type of Tai Chi. I need to get the name of it, but I went to a presentation. It was like about caregiving, or self-care for caregivers, and there was some breathing exercises related, and that presenter, he was speaking about how he had learned these breathing exercises from his trauma from childhood. He had a lot of trauma, and resulting in being perhaps like a poor communicator and just sometimes just blowing up. And, that of course affected his relationships. And, like, of course, sometimes that affects where you stay and, your jobs and different things. And so now here he is. Um, teaching, like I said, a type of Tai Chi that focuses on, your breathing and your stress response. Because if you then pair this breathing response with a stressful event, it kind of retrains your mind and your body to do this versus that. And you overall have like a lower stress response. So that is something. And then also, in another vein, kind of going just way left field, I was speaking with one of my colleagues about cold plunging. And although I'm apprehensive about doing things that are going to make me cold and wet at cold times, the cold plunging is really great because I guess by shocking your body that early in the morning, that is like the most stressful thing you're going to do throughout the day, typically speaking. And so your stress levels don't get as high because you've already kind of like, you know, re, you were at a very high level of stress like first thing in the morning. And that helps kind of build immunity and so forth because these prolonged, or responses to, stress overall. Well, first of all, not well, like PTSD, those type of like prolonged and buried injuries, those require like healing, and you can actually have, like hiccups in your development. And like I was saying, when I taught those, classes, we actually would explore how children who or people, sometimes children who experience trauma and didn't receive any type of counseling and so forth, they actually had like different developments that you could see in the brain. And as far as like development and so forth, and I'm not going to get into all those scientific terms that I'll probably like screw up, but um those things really need to be dealt with and leave definite scars. But then also just dealing with it in the moment, those chronic stressors and unresolved trauma are going to contribute to your high blood pressure, heart disease, and weakened immune function. So that's going to put you at more risk for a lot of ailments.
Absolutely. We talk about PTSD, we talk about, um, you know, unresolved trauma, but let's not forget all mental health disorders, anxiety, depression,
Mhm.
worry, fear, all of those things give you an increased heart rate. And over a prolonged period of time, increases your risk for heart disease.
Definitely. I mean, and I was going to say the same thing. Depression and anxiety are linked to increased risk of heart disease. I mean, heart disease, heart attacks, and strokes. And I mean, it's easy to see because, of course, I mean, it's going to raise your blood pressure. It's going to put strain on your kidneys. And then on top of that, sometimes the coping mechanisms that we choose to kind of offload that stress aren't the best. Um, and then those, depending on what those are and, how your body kind of, what I mean, adapts to that, could lead to other problems, which just, kind of make more problems. So I think sometimes, explaining the impact and of like the trauma, maybe to yourself, even to your loved ones, opening yourself up so that you can, get emotional healing. And that's going to be difficult because, for everybody, that's going to look different. Is that talking through things with family members who are living? Is that, seeking closure with people who are deceased? Is that, getting, professional counseling? Is that self-help books? Is that making sure that you don't isolate yourself? Or is that, using positive self-talk? Like, identifying, being calm and still and focused enough to even assess what like hiccups or issues you're having regarding your mental health is hard in this day and age when you have, the pressures of work, family, maybe your community, maybe your church, or, your professional organizations, whatever it is that you hold near and dear that you feel, giving your time to. But are you giving that time to really assess your needs? And in that, then finding a solution, because sometimes then we just have problems, but we don't have solutions. So, it's kind of like it's quite the journey, because you may get lost along the way, especially if you have dependents and people who depend on you. It's easy for people to get lost in the needs of others. And then sometimes when those things are all gone, it's like, whoa, who am I? What do I do? I don't know how to function. And learning to really be mindful and care for ourselves in the ways that we need to be cared for, or communicating things that we need or that we don't need to, have occur, are difficult, and finding ways in the right time is, definitely stress causing.
I like that you went and explained how healing is important, right? We talked about the traumas, we talked about the dramas, we talked about the things that we all have in common that affect our heart health. And with this being the month of love, let's focus on healing. Healing, how do we heal? Healing is not linear. It's not pop a pill and I'm done. It's not, run a mile and I'm done, or get a gym membership and go, on a regular basis and I'm done. It is certainly something, mind, body, and soul, spirit, as you say, is something that is an ongoing, continual process. So you don't have to wake up and be like, oh, who am I? Where am I? Yes, the struggles of life come and go, but we have to remember a couple things. We get one heart. One, there's not a replacement. You know, there's not too many heart transplants going on for the average person. Huh? So we have to take care of what we have. If we listen to our ancestors, they used to say, if you don't use it, you lose it. And how can we use it? Positive thoughts, affirmations, those things you said, all help to the road of healing. Along with, you know, you're going to do your exercises, of course, but we didn't mention anything about what we put into our mouth because that also plays a part. So when we're thinking of heart health, that salt is not helping you. Those fried foods are not helping you. We have to do
No,
things in balance and make sure that it's not just one sided to have holistic healing. Let's dive into that a bit.
I mean, definitely, I think, we could have a whole series on nutrition and,
Mm-hmm.
things that we definitely could do and what we put in our mouths and what we eat. But I also think that sometimes the biggest barrier to that is ourselves. Like, right, it's February, so a lot of people are making like New Year's resolutions. They're going to the gym. They just purchased their new Peloton. They're getting their lean cuisines, and they're got their happy brood and so forth, so forth. But really, I think you sometimes need to assess why you don't stick to, excuse me, these choices.
Yes,
I
yes.
think you need to get at what is the barrier. You need to sometimes figure out, why are you stopping yourself from this type of success, from this type of wealth. And it may be something like, well, I don't like this food. So you have to find a way to, and like, to like it, or to make you know what I mean, you have to go the extra mile to get to know yourself. Or if you know that this always upsets you with your family member or your significant other, you might need to address that. And so that way you don't keep having these scrapes. And although we're talking about food, I say all this long-winded stuff because sometimes in this day and age, it's so much to do that relying on these fast food, these fried, poor choices is out of convenience because you're swamped for lack of time. So getting these pre-prepped meals or these fast foods and whatever, it's easy. So you need to actually like kind of look at your why and kind of reprogram yourself. And it might be hard to make a lot of major changes all at once. Like, at the beginning of the year, if I'm like, well, I'm going to start exercising 3 times a week, I'm going to stop eating all fast food, I'm going to make sure I get 8 hours of sleep, and I'm not going to eat sugar. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you spread yourself too thin, and there may be like a process actually kind of like associated with you just quitting sugar. You know what I'm saying? I haven't done that, so I'm not sure, but people who have done it have told me that, your body needs to adjust to things of that nature. Sometimes when you're used to, feeding yourself certain things, when you cut back, there may be, a little bit of kickback. Um, and then also I think what you eat and how you're spending your time. Like, I like how you talked about, our ancestors saying, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it, and I totally feel the same way. And like something that I feel that we've lost is eating like dinner or meals as like a family or as a collective. Because during that, that's like time to de-stress. It's time to kind of like feel each other out. A lot of times we're doing communication now behind electronic devices with emojis, which really give us control over how we are presented or portrayed. When you're in the moment, if I'm looking at your face and looking at your body and your body actions, I can take my own assessment to how you're feeling. Now, I might be off, but a lot of times I think in the live actual moment, you can read body language and interact with humans better. And if there is something that you need to discuss, there might be an opportunity that you might need to have a discussion later, but we miss some of these opportunities with our highly technological society, I think. And things like depression and anxiety can go unnoticed because if I text you, hey, how are you doing? I can say I'm fine and send you a really cute emoji, but really I'm at home. You know what I mean? Like my soul is torn, but I don't want anybody to know. Now, if we were together, like, you came by, it would be harder for me to hide that and harder for, presumably someone who cared enough to check in on me, you know what I mean, to not know that I was distraught. So
Mhm.
you've got things of that nature. You've got situations that can be put on hold, as far as even, I'm one of those firm believers. I believe that there's a way to say everything. You can speak your mind and not disrespect, a person. Now, in this day and age, people don't always feel that you are, I guess, warranted that type of audience. But I always just thought the mature thing was if you have an issue or a concern or something with someone, you discuss it with them in a respectful manner. And I'm not good at holding things in. And some people, are. I do internalize some things because I think my big thing is like, I may not take time to process what I'm feeling. And so I have to take time to be still so that I can process, so I can let my emotions catch up to me. I think, and you probably could agree, as a nurse, you sometimes have to put all of those things aside. And for me, it just became, I guess maybe a buildup of already who I was, like an add-on to my person. So I have to take time to reflect. And for me, reflection and meditation do deal with being, like alone in prayer. Or for me, a lot of times prayer is like conversation, but with God. And that does help me to kind of, get back. And through the course of my life, I've been led to have different types of healings, where maybe I didn't listen to secular music. It wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to listen to secular music, things I told people, but my spirit just didn't want anything but maybe worship music. Worship and prayer are big outlets for me. Um, so for me, I have to be able to sit still. So I can't watch too many of those like investigative shows or things of that nature because it's going to kind of keep me on edge like you were talking about in that fight or flight mode. And the over inundation of news and politics also is something that I have to limit. So I think just knowing yourself and things that you can cut down that aren't necessary to your life, like the stress of your loved ones and things that you feel, it's going to be harder to cut those things out of your life. And not saying that you should, but just modifying some of those habits. So starting with little things with I like to listen to gospel music first. That's kind of like my tone. um Not putting in a lot of negativity or things that are going to emotionally tax me that aren't worthy of my time. And for some of us, I think um replacing some of those, maladaptive coping skills is going to be, a little bit, difficult because, you just have to kind of just be for real with yourself. And that's hard for some of us to do, A lot of us use coping skills like drinking, overeating, smoking, under eating, things of that nature, as coping skills. And those things aren't necessarily going to, do what you need them to do. So you're going to want to replace those with physical activity, maybe even things like thinking on a deeper level. Of course, we're nurses. So, thinking about releasing endorphins and improving mood and doing things like painting or writing. Um, even getting in a support group for some people, being by themselves and having that non like overstimulated time is better. But for some people who are like always antisocial or withdrawing, getting around people is going to take their mind off of things. And then, we don't want to underestimate I guess professional care because like they have some techniques, when you are, I guess, seeking like professional counsel, you want to find a place where they, are using trauma informed care. And that's somewhere that has been mindful of the trauma and realizing that you are, at a place of healing and it's not sometimes even the words that we use can sometimes kind of set people in a bad headspace. And so we want to be mindful of those things. And you talked about, positive self-talk. And
Mhm.
then one of the techniques that some of the counselors that I've had the pleasure of getting to hang out with, they use like MBSR techniques, mindfulness-based stress reduction. So that's like an evidence-based program that combines mindfulness meditation and yoga to reduce stress. So it focuses attention on different body parts to increase awareness and relaxation. Um, you can also do, we kind of spoke about sitting meditation or mindful movement. And these acts can reduce like anxiety and depression, which can lower blood pressure and improve your heart health. Because you know what, I don't know if you realize this, but people with depression have a 64% higher risk of developing coronary artery disease, and people with anxiety disorders are associated with a 26% increased risk of coronary heart disease.
Wow. Absolutely. We have to be mindful of what we do, how we do it, and how often and where we're doing it at in order to protect our heart health. And what I mean when I say that about where we're doing it at, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to show your emotions, but for how long? you know, um, and where and what are the repercussions? Are you causing yourself more stress? It's nothing wrong with, having your space, wherever that is, in your car, on a walk, whatever, and just screaming, letting it out versus doing it face to face, right? It's like pressure building. And then they say that pressure breaks pipes. Well, pressure breaks your heart. So we have to make
True.
sure, I mean, literally, it does. I mean, what is blood pressure? Right? It's how your
Right.
blood is going through your vessels, right? So we have to find healthy alternatives to um, managing our heart health. And so I absolutely agree with you. Physical activity, creative outlets, and it's nothing wrong with getting professional help. If you need to make an omelet, is it a problem to go
Nope.
and buy one? To go and spend your time with someone that can make one? Or spend the next 6 months trying to get it together? Because it's simple to A, B, and C. It may not be simple to D. Maybe you're D. There's nothing wrong with going and get professional help.
Nothing wrong
They
with it. And
are
I
the
think
professionals. Like, why waste your time trying to solve a problem that you could be having ABCD fun instead of the worry, the stress, the trauma faster if you get help? This world was not meant for us to be alone. And it is not meant for us to solve our problems alone. We are made for community. And so, yes, there's times where being alone is important, but again, balance. There's times when you need some professional help, some external help. Maybe it's not counseling, maybe it's a support group. Either way, make sure that you find what works for you and don't give up. Don't give up. Identify your triggers. Then, like you said, develop a plan. What works for you? And baby steps. Baby steps. Let's not leap, fall, get disappointed, and quit. Baby steps and celebrate each win. That's how you build.
Definitely.
Yes.
Resilience.
Yes, that
That
is
is
how
how
you
you build
build
resilience.
resilience. Absolutely. And that's how you take good care of your heart, loving yourself so you can love others.
Definitely, because higher resilience is associated with lower levels of inflammation and reduced heart disease risk.
Hmm.
Individuals with strong self esteem and high resilience are more likely to engage in heart healthy behaviors. This is why I keep kind of fluttering back to the emotional well being. Sometimes it's finding your why or your purpose or your not why or whatever it is. Um, and being for real with yourself, because like you have to set reasonable goals. You're going to be disappointed if you're always falling short of your goals. But in your defense of yourself, if you're always setting goals that are too high for you to reasonably obtain, you need to maybe, kind of restructure that, And sometimes taking like practices like journaling allows you to work through that. And what works for now may not work for later. And you may have to
Yes.
readjust. And I think kind of revisiting, what worked and where you're at in the process. And sometimes we don't take that type of time to focus on ourselves, which we have to. And so I know we're kind of getting close to the time here. So you kind of hit on how we're not meant to be alone. And sometimes if we don't know what to do, volunteering and just doing like acts of kindness, safe acts of kindness,
Hmm.
can really just kind of, hoist your spirits and make you feel better. Um, there are some volunteering opportunities in Jacksonville that are a little bit off the beaten path. Maybe you're not a people person. Maybe, you're intimidated by germs, or maybe, you've got some, but you want to make some changes. You could always volunteer at the Animal Care and Protective Services. That would allow you to work with animals, adoption events, maybe even administrative tasks. Volunteering at the public library, you can support literacy programs. Um, Feeding Northeast Florida. That kind of goes without, I think, explanation. Habitat for Humanity or the Humane Society, that's also another one dealing with animals. And let's say you're not really trying to do anything that's that committable. You can prepare a homemade meal for a neighbor or a friend. Share snacks with your coworkers or classmates just to brighten their day. You can spend time picking up litter in a local park or at the beach. Spring break is getting ready to hit here, and I have myself gone to the Jacksonville beach and sometimes been disgusted with the amount of litter and just spent time actually picking up the litter because there was nowhere to beach at because it was all littery. So you can pick an area. Um, if you're not into that, you could also donate books. And you could just write thank you notes to express your gratitude to community workers, your friends, healthcare providers. And these events activities can like foster a sense of community. They can give you some personal fulfillment and contribute to better heart health. I'm a big advocate that maintaining emotional and mental health is a big, big, big contributor to helping you take control of maintaining your heart health and actually sticking to it.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
A Star, this has been absolutely a fantastic discussion. I've really enjoyed discussing just these endeavors of the heart and ways to keep our heart healthy on multiple levels. I've just enjoyed our conversation immensely.
So have I. I think it's very informative when we get together, collaborate, um, and just shine bright, right? Shine a light on the things that make a difference. So I'm so appreciative of you, Monica.
Oh, wow. You flatter me too much. I am so appreciative of you. And I'm just thankful that we could do this and have this conversation because this is important, educating and just reminding people to take time to prioritize their heart health, their emotional health, love yourself, because health is wealth.
Hmm.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get on out of here. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks again for listening. If you or anyone you know needs to learn CPR, first aid, or a life saving skill, please contact People's Choice CPR and Safety. From CPR to self care, the Wellness Pulse is staying in rhythm with your well being. I'm Monica Stevens. Take care.